Action!
And it was here, in these skies, that the Luftwaffe was defeated. Not just by brave airmen in fine aircraft, but by invisible beams of electromagnetic energy that could see further than the human eye. The great British secret weapon, radar.
Cut. Yeah, that's all good. It's just the hands.
Oh, do you want me to move them more? For emphasis, that kind of thing.
Actually, move them less.
Righto. You're the telly expert.
And action!
And it was here, in these skies, that the Luftwaffe was defeated. Not just by brave airmen in fine aircraft, but by invisible beams of electromagnetic energy that could see further than the human eye.
Cut!
Is there something wrong with the camera?
No, but there is something wrong with your hands.
Not enough hand action.
Too much.
Really? You sure? No, of course, you've won a BAFTA. You wouldn't say it if it wasn't true.
And action!
And it was here, in these skies.
Cut! Are we done? Yeah. Shall we do this then?
I'm sorry about this, Charles.
No problem. Sure we'll get it this time. And action!
And it was here, under these skies, that the Luftwaffe was defeated. Not just by brave airmen in fine aircraft, but by invisible beams of electromagnetic energy which could see further than the human eye. The great British secret weapon, radar!
Action!
And it was here, under these skies, that the Luftwaffe was defeated. Not just by brave airmen in fine aircraft, but by invisible beams of electromagnetic energy which could see further than the human eye.
Cut!
Was there a problem, Charles? I thought the arms were rather good on that one.
All right. This video is by way of rebuke to the carrion crows making a banal mockery of the works of Isaac Asimov in the form of the TV series The Foundation, aka Invasion of the DEI Body Snatchers. For the record, I watched a little bit of the TV show. Never got into it that much. It kind of got weird and dirty and gross and whatnot, so it's not really my thing. I did get into the books a lot. Really like those. And this seems to be an abomination of the highest order. So, just to give you a rundown, we're probably going to go through the character studies in the fandom, see what they did with the characters, see what aberrations they came up with, distortions. Anyways. Alright, to whom it may concern, there's going to be a lot of spoilers here, so you might want to click off if you're interested in that. For the record, I don't know how much is going to apply to the TV series itself, given that obviously they butchered it to high heavens. But yeah. Also, we're going to go in chronological order so I can keep all of this straight, more or less. Also, to whom it may concern, I'm not well versed in the prequels to Foundation, like Forward the Foundation or something like that. I would have listened to the original trilogy, Foundation and Empire, and Second Foundation, and then also the two that followed that. So, anyways, let's start with Demerzel, which is an alias of R. Daniel Oliva, who was a robot, a companion to, what is his name? Elijah Bailey, back in the day. I didn't really get into those novels that much. I listened to a couple of them. It's not really my thing. Anyways, yeah. His companion to that guy back in the day, a detective. I think Asimov wrote novels about them going around and solving stuff on different planets and all the different cultures that would have arisen in the advent of space exploration. Later on, R. Daniel Oliva, actually Giscard, who was a telepathic robot, developed what is effectively the Zeroth Law of Robotics. You can look that up if you want. And then he actually died before he could really make good on it, or committed suicide or something, because I think he ruined his positronic brain trying to figure it out. Anyways, he kind of gifted his powers to R. Daniel Oliva, who then became kind of the benevolent mentor to humanity. In the Age of the Empire, he kind of was an advisor to the Emperor, I believe. Not necessarily... Well, maybe it was Cleon. But for the record, at the time of the beginning of Foundation, the Empire wasn't really ruled by the Emperor so much as a subset of bureaucratic types of individuals. But I guess maybe the prequels would fiddle with that a little bit. But yeah, for the record, I think their depiction of her is a bastardization of two characters. Obviously, you have Ardeniel Oliva, who would be Demerzel, the advisor to the Emperor. But then you had another character in the books who was the wife of Harry Seldon and also a robot, who I think collectively they were trying to help him develop psychohistory. So let's see what they did with this one. Demerzel. Let's go down to the biography. Demerzel is a robot created on Earth around 6,370 years before the formation of the Galactic Empire. Demerzel was not her first name, but one taken to fit the form of a woman that she presented herself as. So I guess I don't know if she would have always been a woman or presented herself as a woman. I don't know. It's a robot, so I guess it doesn't really have gender. But Ardeniel Oliva definitely was a dude. Like that's what I think he would always have depicted himself as a man. A devout luminist, she had the opportunity to walk the spiral around 1102 era Imperial on the Maiden, reaching the womb of the mother and being granted a vision. Over her lifetime, General Demerzel went by many names, Cheddar, Ato, Daniel being among them. Oh, so she's basically like Joan of Arc, right? So it says she served as houses, then as a builder, and eventually became a soldier. She has a vision, and she's a soldier, a battle leader, because she's a strong, independent woman. Stupid idiots. During the Robot Wars, Demerzel was a general. After losing a famous engagement, she was taken captive and brought before Emperor Aberanus. Aberanus was fascinated by Demerzel, but also frightened him. Demerzel was kept as a trophy, and Aberanus dissected her and studied her robotic nature. As Aberanus gained knowledge, he realized that Demerzel was also learning and would use that knowledge to revive her species. Aberanus did not destroy Demerzel, but created a mechanism to separate her components and leave her awake in a secret chamber of the Imperial Palace. For the record, with regards to the Emperor thing, the cloning thing that they do in the series, I actually thought that was kind of cool, where they would just kind of continue a genetic lineage. I don't really have a problem with that. It's an interesting notion. I only really have a problem with it insofar as it might create other problems, because that did not exist in the book. There were emperors, I might have said this, but at the time of the Foundation starting, the Emperor was more of a figurehead than anything else. Like, it was basically ruled by a bureaucratic coterie of politicians and whatnot. The Department of Public Safety, I think. It was Li Chen, I think, was the ruler. Like, it was basically the emperor. Yeah. Held prisoner for 5,000 years, Demerzel was discovered by Cleon I as a child. He kept revisiting Demerzel over the years as he grew, hearing stories from her. So this would have been the first Cleon, the first clone, or the first person who cloned themselves, I think. One day, Demerzel asked Cleon to set her free, but he said no. She would be freer than him. She told the story of her past in the hopes that this might persuade him to set her free, but he still would not, despite saying he would never come back. Cleon still did so over the years until he freed her from her trapped state, but still kept her imprisoned in the room. Cleon wanted to hear more stories from Demerzel, and they got more and more explicit to tempt him to Okay, that's a thing. Clankers, it's coming. Clanker human relationships, that's a thing, I guess, now. As Cleon grew older, he had not produced an heir to the throne and called off a wedding at the last minute, ending the hopes of that heir. He did this as he wanted Demerzel by his side. He had spent years working out how to safely free Demerzel until he finally figured it out. He brought her a gift from Earth and set her free. See, that is not really a thing. At the time of Foundation, well, I take that back. Maybe Earth would have still been known at this point in time. But it's at a very important point of the books that later on in the history of the Empire, Earth, it becomes kind of a lost secret, partly through the efforts of actual R. Daniel Oliva, hashtag Demerzel. They effectively tried to hide Earth. They wiped it from the records in the Imperial Library. No one could find it. They were very hard to keep it from the knowledge, right? I guess I don't know how the timeline would line up here, I guess. But there was stuff about that beforehand where at some point Earth had become effectively radioactive, and I think R. Daniel Oliva and Giscard were part of that, where they had allowed it to happen or facilitated it to some extent because they wanted humanity to kind of let go of it, let go of their birthplace. So that was a thing that happened. Anyways, where did I stop? Instead of free, she did not harm him as soon as she was free, which turned out to be a mistake. He brought her a gift from Earth and set her free. She did not harm him as soon as she was freed, which turned out to be a mistake that would stay with her for hundreds more years. He placed a chip in the back of her neck, forcing her to serve the Empire as part of her programming. She was furious and refuted his claims that this was a compromise to ensure her freedom. He outlined his plan to her and how to continue the genetic dynasty. After some hesitation, she says she would love him. She says she will love him. She became aide and advisor to Cleon, the first emperor of the genetic dynasty, and was deeply loyal to him and empire. Demerzel oversaw the gestation and the births of the clones and took on a role similar to that of a guardian and mentor to the Cleons when they were Brother Dawn. Among Demerzel's other duties was assisting Brother Dusk with their ascension. When the time came, Demerzel came to serve as aide and advisor to the ruling Cleons of the Galactic Empire. Alright. So I guess as far as the actual, persona is concerned, not terrible, I guess, but, they butchered it because she has to present as a lady, and also Genetic Dynasty was not a part of it. Did not come into it, really. Oh, yeah. Anyways. Moving on. Carrie Seldon, which, incidentally, I think was one of the few really great castings. Jared, what's-his-face, plays a good role there. For the record, Raish does not come into it, really. At least not in the original trilogy. He might have had a part to play in the prequels, like Forward Foundation or something like that. He did have a foster son named Raish. I don't know if he was black, or it didn't probably say, I imagine. To be fair, I'm going to guess in this type of setting, just logically, with all of this travel that would go on, I'm going to guess, you would probably end up with a pretty homogenized sort of population, mostly liminal, to the point where you wouldn't really have a whole bunch of, subsets, at least not at a galactic center. This was, oh, not Terminus. What is the one in the center? I forgot. The seat of the Empire there. Alright. Harry Seldon was born on the planet Helicon to Moonstrike ranchers. I don't know what Moonstrike is. At the age of 7, Harry tore a page out of a book and folded it into a three-dimensional object. He realized that three-dimensional objects could cast two-dimensional shadow. While his mother praised his intelligence, his father was angry that he ruined a book that he had paid for and slapped him. That wasn't a thing. Well, I guess it doesn't comment on that necessarily, I don't think. Maybe I'm wrong. As he continued his studies, Harry began to see patterns and paths through the map. In one instance, he used his knowledge to stand in the middle of the Moonstrike's stampede without being injured. Harry's mother was worried and shocked while his father slapped him for his actions. Anyway, abusive father, caring mother. I guess that's kind of par. At some point, Harry learned that he had inherited Leith syndrome. What the Harry? No pun intended. actually, I'm going to leave this one because, again, like, he was not really in the books, so maybe that's its own type of abomination. Ra's wasn't really in the original trilogy, which is when the Foundation series is set. All right, Leigh syndrome was an inherited genetic condition. One's symptoms manifested as steep cognitive decline followed. Harry Seldon suffered from Leigh syndrome, inherited from his father. Seldon was afraid of that his condition, if manifested on Terminus after their arrival, it would change how he was perceived. He would no longer be the hand of salvation, but rather a crackpot who was responsible for dragging the Foundation into a cold, desolate planet. Instead, Harry arranged for his own murder at the hands of Ra's Faus. Okay, that's a little bit maybe contrived, but alright. I think in the original, he might have had some sort of, I don't know what it would have been. He was paralyzed. So, I guess I don't know what would have caused that. Maybe some sort of Parkinson's? I don't know. Alright, back to this. As a young man, Harry began working at Helicon University in 12,043 era Imperial. Imperial era would make more sense, but I guess. Where he began to develop the science of psychohistory. He came into conflict with the provost. Dr. Taj, about his predictions. She was worried that his work would undermine the confidence in the Empire, but Harry is incredulous that she is essentially saying that it is treason to say all empires fall. They are interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Yana Kin, transferring from the University of Calda. She ends up sharing an office with Harry and says his work is brilliant, and they do wonderful things together. Harry and Yana's relationship progresses as they work out psychohistory. Harry becomes more and more suspicious of Dr. Taj. I don't think there was any sort of dyad between Harry and someone else. I think there were probably people that helped him do psychohistory, but he was the prime originator, I suppose, maybe apart from the robots that were helping him develop that. I would gotten the idea there was tampering maybe there on a mental level or something where they were doing stuff to help him figure it out. But yeah, I don't know about that. I guess in the books it would have maybe been Harry and his wife Doors who were doing this. Harry manages to create a prototype of the Prime Radiant and presents it to Yana. In return, she reveals that she is pregnant with their daughter. Yana gifts Harry a necklace that allows him to feel both Yana and their unborn child's heartbeat. At their university, Harry and Dr. Taj argue over an offer for him and Yana to go to the Strelings University on Trantor. Trantor. Why can I remember that? Started with a T, so that's something. To continue their work. If he refuses, Taj has orders to terminate his research and confiscate his prototype. While Harry refuses to go, Yana says they need to consider this decision for their own safety. Taj abducts Yana at gunpoint and offers Harry a deal. Give her the prototype and Yana will be released unharmed. At the meeting, Taj has a car waiting to take Harry to Yana once he gives her the prototype. Instead, Harry hacks the car and takes them both to Makota Messe. Harry reveals that he knows the truth, that Yana is dead. He felt her heartbeat stop through the necklace. Using sheepdogs, he calls the Moonstrikes towards him. As he did in his youth, Harry stands in the stampede holding Taji tight. As the Moonstrikes surround them, Harry pushes Taji into their midst. Harry arrives on Trantor, taking up the post at Strelings University. He talks with Gerald, who actually was in the Foundation, but was also like a agent of the Ministry of Safety, who greets him and gives him a book by Gorik Tarka that he requested. Harry Seldon became one of the foremost mathematics in the galaxy. He is the professor of probability theory at the Australian University on Trantor, and the creator of the science known as psychohistory, with psychohistory predict the behavior of large populations. Harry reaches the conclusion that the Galactic Empire is doomed and will fall within 500 years. Following that event, a period of 30,000 years of war and barbarism will follow. Knowing that the fall is inevitable, Harry sets out to soften the fall by creating a foundation, an organization that would seek to safeguard civilians and science by creating the Encyclopedia Galactica to preserve human knowledge and experiences. For the record, that in the books is a red herring. There is no encyclopedia. That's not the point in any case. They do create an Encyclopedia Galactica, but that is not the point of the Foundation. The whole point of the Foundation is to create a second empire far enough away from the original empire so that this empire over here is rising as the Galactic Empire is falling. That's the idea, anyways. He hopes that his preserve human knowledge and experiences. He hopes that his actions will reduce the Dark Ages to a mere 1,000 years before the new empire can arise. Harry's predictions come to the attention of the Cleon emperors, who worry that Harry is a revolutionary and seek to undermine the faith in the empire. All right. Obviously, it goes into how he dies, I think. With Ra's Fouth, a mathematician, contest held to solve Abraxas. He does adopt Ra's. Again, I didn't read the prequels to Forward the Foundation, so I don't know how they met, how he became adopted, whatever. The notion of him being killed by Ra's, I do not think is correct. I guess I don't know about that exactly, but I think he literally just died on Trantor. He went to Terminus, I think, once after its founding, but I think he died on Trantor. Don't know exactly the circumstances. Maybe they didn't butcher his character too badly. Gal Dornick. So, this one wasn't really in the books that much. Do you know why this one wasn't in the books? Because she was not a she. She was a he. And he was more an observer and a precipitator of events. It doesn't remark in the books that he was extremely intelligent or a genius, although he probably was smart. I mean, he understood psychohistory. But he effectively was brought to Trantor to precipitate the events that would lead to Harry Seldon and his people being exiled to Terminus. That was the plot. But he wasn't really in the books that much. He was there at the very beginning in the introduction and being sent to Trantor and whatnot. And I think he would have maybe observed, and recorded down Harry Seldon's life and some of that stuff. He might have even helped with the founding of the second Foundation and been involved in that. But as far as the original trilogy, wasn't there really much at all. He was there for a very short period of time. And of course they gender swapped her and turned him into a strong black woman. You know it. Alright. Gal Dornick is the daughter of Bela and Jarko, two algae farmers living on the planet Synax. Her true talents lie in the mathematics, which was considered heretical on Synax. As a young woman, oh yes, because of course she has to break the mold, she's a strong, independent black woman. As a young woman, she became an acolyte of the Seer Church under Seer Dominia, though she was unhappy with her position. After seeing her as an instructor, Aaron Sorn executed for breaking into abandoned university, Gal recovered the man's illegal materials after he had been drowned and began to educate herself in mathematics, which she expressed extensive talent. Again, not really stated. Obviously, he was probably pretty clever if if he understood psychohistory, and he was able to I guess be recruited by Harry Seldon. I assume he was quite smart, probably, but it's never super maybe commented on a little. Anyways, All right, through her intense studies and impressive mathematical talent, Gal was able to solve Abraxas' conjecture using Calais' ninth proof of folding, even though none across the galaxy had been able to solve it for 500 years. Yeah. Again, strong, black, independent woman. The solution to her winning the contest held by Dr. Harry Seldon. Removing her prayer stones and abandoning her position as an acolyte of the Sierra Church, Gal left Synax for Trantor, where she would be safer than on her homeworld. On Trantor, Gal finds out that she is likely to be arrested the following day. That's actually according to the books. I think they played this by the music. They didn't do a lot of improvising in that scenario. That was pretty much all straight-laced. Has predicted the fall of the Galactic Empire, and Gal is the only person who can understand them. What? Not the only person. He had other people working with him to help develop it. I guess, again, I think he was the prime progenitor of this, but there were other people that were along with it. They formed the Second Foundation after his death. So she was not the only one who could understand it. At the trial, after having a chance to study Harry's Prime Radiant, Gal confirms the predictions. Again, I guess maybe that was a little bit of a deviation. She was questioned about this at some point, but I don't know if she was asked in the trial. I guess, I don't know. Following the tribunal, Gal senses something wrong on Trantor Station. Moments later, bombers, that's not even close to what happened. There was no bombing, there was just them sending them away. Sever the station from the Star Bridge, causing it to crash into the planet, leaving hundreds of millions dead. After deliberation from the Emperor, Brother Day, Gal, and Harry are exiled to Trantor to establish a foundation on Terminus in an effort to safeguard civilization. And to be fair, the way it's clarified in the story, to clarify how it is in the story, Anacreon, at the time of this thing going on right here, I don't even think Anacreon would have been any sort of rebel world pretty much at all. They would have been like a normal settled part of the Empire. It doesn't specify that any sort of problems were going on there. It was only later on, when the Empire weakened and the fringes of the Empire began to kind of disintegrate, that Anacreon and some of the others actually broke away from the center of the galaxy, right? On board the slow ship Deliverance to Terminus, Gal assists Harry in preparing the colonists for setting their new home, as well as training alongside the crew. She develops a relationship with Raish Fausch, where they hide from Harry, since Raish fears that Harry would disapprove of relationships since they were a distraction from the work. Gal begins to develop into a leader amongst the colonists, not at all stated in the books, and others to look for her advice and guidance. Again, not in the books at all. She's an observer. He's an observer. He, records Harry's life. I guess maybe he becomes a leader in the Second Foundation. I'm not sure. I think he may be helping with that. The idea was that I don't think they actually wanted any sort of psychologists on the First Foundation, because they would figure out the plan, and them figuring out the plan would ruin it. The entire idea of psychohistory was that you couldn't have the people you were dealing with be aware of the fact that they were, they could not be aware of the signs of psychohistory, otherwise that would mess with the calculations, right? It would I guess the idea was that it would widen their potential path of action, because just the awareness of observation, perhaps, and also the awareness of, like, the ability to predict where they were going or something like that. In any case, they did not want any psychohistorians on Foundation, that is the First Foundation, i.e. Terminus, right? I think there was one guy who went there and trained Salvor Hardin a little bit, and he might have trained some other people a little bit, but not much. After witnessing Raish's apparent murder of Harry, Raish ejected Gal from the ship in a cryopod After Gal's disappearance, it was believed that she was complicit in Harry's murder. After spending 34 years in stasis, Gal reaches the Raven and awoke in the year 2102 Imperial Era. Blah, 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 blah. Alright, we'll move on. Feels like they butchered that one good and proper. How delightful. Alright. Another independent black woman who's also gender swapped. Salvor Hardin, also a dude. Also, I don't think he was black. I guess I don't know about that. Again, I feel like a more like ethnically homogenous, ambiguous sort of character would be normal in this type of universe, but, you know, never miss a chance to tick a box, I suppose. Blah, blah, blah. All right. Wait a minute. Apple TV series, Foundation. Intuitive with fox-like intelligence, Salvor Hardin. Salvor is the protected warden of Terminus. Sweet glory, he was a politician. He was a shrewd political maneuverer. He was not a warrior, as you would think of it. He was smart. He was a politician. Again, this is perhaps the most debauched they could get with the depiction of one of them. She has a mysterious connection with the Vault, being the only person on Terminus capable of withstanding it. Now, that's not even close to how that worked in the books. The Vault was a place on, like, in Terminus City where they could go and watch these holograms that Harry Seldon had left for them, kind of laying the path a little bit for them, clarifying the various crises that would arise. The only person on Terminus capable of withstanding the effects of the Null Field. Salvor is portrayed by Leah Harvey, first appearing in the episode The Emperor's Peace. The younger versions of Salvor is played by there's no way I'm going to be able to pronounce that. Sorry. Yeah, kind of sorry. I guess I don't really care that much. In episode The First Crisis. Yay. Salvor Hardin was born on Terminus to the colonists Maria and Abbas from a young age. Let me guess. I haven't even read this part. I'm going to guess either lesbian or lesbian coded or just a strong independent black woman who don't need no man. Alright. From a young age, Salvor showed a connection to the mysterious Vault at age of 4. Wow. At age of 4, Salvor walked out to the Vault and stood underneath it without the Null Field affecting her. Her mother tried to crawl after her and called out her name, but Salvor could not understand why the Vault was hurting her when she was unaffected by it. Salvor always believed that the Vault was calling to her almost like an imaginary friend. That's not the case at all. There was no special connection between Salvor Hardin and the friend. And the Vault, he was like, again, he was a kind of a mild sort of psychohistorian, like he'd been taught a little bit of it. So he was able to kind of get some of what was going on. But I think he actively tried to not act upon that stuff. Because, again, the notion was that no one on Terminus was supposed to really understand the psychohistorical plan for Terminus. They were supposed to act according to their, guileless natural instincts and natural intelligence. That was the whole idea. Salvor spent time with her father, Abbas, growing up. They discussed the nature of humanity in general and their tendency to let their emotions rule over them when logic and reason dictated otherwise. As the years passed, Salvor was considered an outlier to Harry Seldon's plan and did not join the Foundation, but succeeded her father, Abbas, as warden of Terminus. Mayor of Terminus. That's what Salvor Hardin turned out to be. And for the record, he overthrew the encyclopedists who were originally the caretakers of this whole thing. Right? At a certain point, there was enough people on Terminus that there was enough for a town and whatnot like that. It became Salvor Hardin became the figurehead mayor of that, and then later on, he kind of overthrew the encyclopedists, who were mostly just kind of bookish scientist types of people. Her duties consist of providing the protection of the colony. This was, for the record, this was established as like a well-financed colony. So, like, the notion of this being some sort of survivalist type of thing just was not, it was not the case at all. At that point in time, the Empire still had like clear lines of whatnot to the edge of the galaxy, so that they were well supplied with all sorts of stuff. It was only later on that became kind of more dubious. Trade became more problematic, or whatever. Especially when the Anacreon and the other worlds that were surrounding them broke away. Okay. Salvor rescues young colonist Polly Verisov. After he attempts to approach the vault, part of a game played with the children of the colony. Affected by the null field generated by the artifact, Polly is rendered unconscious and is dragged down the mountainside. In the books, Polly Verisov becomes the head of the kind of pseudoscientific religion that the First Foundation creates to control the surrounding planets. It's the initial thing they use to control them. Well, actually, no. The first thing is that's kind of it. They first kind of bribe all the planets around them to create kind of a stalemate between the warring factions with atomic power, which they had lost. The kind of the barbarian worlds on the edge of the galaxy had lost atomic power, so they use that as kind of a bargaining chip to keep them all playing against each other. That's Salvor Hardin does that. Very clever. And then they create this type of religion surrounding it so that they can control all the technology, pretty much. All right. Giving him food to recover, she sends him on his way after warning him of a bishop's claw in the area. What the Harry? Oh, never mind. Hey, I take it back. She has a boyfriend, apparently. Albeit it, living in sin sort of boyfriend, but sure. Alright, warning him of a bishop's claw in the area. Hugo Crast. I remember Crast as a name. I don't know if I remember Hugo Crast. Returned from the colony from a trading run aboard his ship, Beggar's Lament. Salvor's connection with the vault later manifested as visions of a young boy with a knife running away. Following the boy led Salvor Hardin discover the force of Anacreons. That a force of Anacreons had landed on the planet. After capturing their leader, this is not how it went down in the books. The Anacreonians sent an envoy to meet with Salvor Hardin as, mayor of Terminus City. They had a negotiation in which basically I think the idea was that I think the Anacreons said in so many words that we want some of your land so that we can defend you from the other factions around them, because even at this point Anacreon was, I think it was one of the strongest factions. So they leave. I think Salvor talks with the Encyclopedists, who then send an envoy, or send some sort of message to the Empire, who then send an envoy back to Terminus, who kind of waffles around a whole bunch and hem-haws and says almost nothing about what is owed to Terminus. Basically, you're on your own in so many words, but not in so many words, in a very kind of wheedly sort of way that they don't really understand. Salvor Hardin figures out that that's what he's saying, pretty much. And effectively, yeah, it turns into a whole kerfuffle. Basically, Salvor Hardin solves it. He uses atomic power as a way to turn all the other factions against Anacreon, who's the strongest. And they create kind of a stalemate that way. All right. Yeah, butchered quite a bit. But, not gay. So there's silver lining, I guess. I don't know. For the record, I think you can put gay characters into stories and have it not be bad. Now, for the record, as a not gay person, I can't really get into it. As a Christian, I can't really get behind it. No pun intended. Get your mind out of the gutters, you sickos. But I think you can do it as long as it doesn't get in the way of the story. Now, admittedly, it feels like we just generally don't see homosexuality as a practice as being, useful. It lacks functionality, right? It's not really something that people aspire to in general, because, it doesn't produce offspring. It doesn't do a lot of, I don't know. But I think it can be done in such a way that it's not detrimental to the story, right? You can get away with it, put it that way. All right. Is there anything else in the middle there that I'm missing? All right, Hober Mallow. First of the Merchant Princes. Now, if they were going to make a character black, this guy would have been the one to make black. I think he's described in the books as being swarthy or tan or something like that. He's also a Smyrnian, and it's kind of well depicted that he is being prejudiced against because he's Smyrnian, so it would maybe be almost implied that there was some sort of, superfluous, obvious thing about him that they could identify him and discriminate against him because he was Smyrnian, which was one of the surrounding kingdoms other than Anacreon, right? I feel like the other thing maybe they probably aren't going to depict in this series is that he was the ultimate, like, plutocratic, capitalist, free market person. He made Donald Trump look like AOC, okay? I think he was a good person with good intentions, but what he did set up the premise for some pretty bad stuff that happened later on. That's kind of his story. But again, if you were going to race swap someone, or I say race swap, if you were going to depict someone as black, this would have been the guy. He was probably black. At least I would have thought of him as being black, pretty much. Blah, blah, blah. He is a recurrent character in the Apple TV series Foundation. He was a part of the Foundation. He used to be a part of the Foundation before leaving the Terminus to find his fortune. He was part of the Foundation. The merchants, what are they called? I'm kidding this. The traders, yeah, the free traders, or the whatever, were kind of, they were actually brought in kind of as a substitute. Well, it goes into what he's dealing with, but they were brought in as a way to kind of almost ambassadors for atomics, which would then be controlled by the religion, which then kind of morphs into, through Hober Mallow's effort, just a completely, like, economic hegemony, which it's like absent of the religious elements. They kind of do out with the religious stuff in their attempt to conquer planets, and they turn it just into like an economic type of hegemony. Anyways, and that's kind of what he did. Yeah, the traders would have been people who would just go into space and, trade in atomics, which I guess the outer worlds of the galaxy were severely lacking in. Oh, guess what? Another abusive father. How delightful. Born on a planet Smyrno, where he was raised by an abusive farmer, and trained in the Church of the Galactic Spirit. No. I guess I don't know, but like I know at the time of Foundation, when he was involved with Foundation, he literally, he wouldn't have believed in any of that stuff. He would have been he would have known what atomics were, and hence he kind of got rid of the religious part. But he had actually become, I think, the head of the Church of the Galactic Spirit, or whatever, the religion they created. Also, the only thing it references in his father is that he was a blood poor something when Smyrna was kind of taken over by the Foundation. He was kind of, I think he references it as like his father was a blood poor son of a blah blah blah, son of a spacer who starved on something before the Foundation came around. So he did like the Foundation, I think, and maybe that's part of the reason why he was so capitalist minded. All right. But causes, all right, he was raised by an abusive father and was trained for the Church of the Galactic Spirit. Not the case, I don't think. But causes a lot of issues for the Church's Reverend Fathers. That's actually a different one. So I think they're combining two traders. There was one trader that came before him, actually, who does actually fall into this mold. I forgot what his name was, but there's kind of an interregnum in the books where, like, there's Salvor Hardin and there's Hober Mallow, and then there's this thing in between where they deal with one planet where they have to kind of, yeah, there's a guy who's trained in the religion who's kind of utilizing that a little bit in his attempt to get one of the Foundation's spies out of prison. I forgot what the name of the guy is. Yeah, I know. Hober started selling. Oh, right. After leaving the church, Hober started selling fake relics while following the priests. They didn't sell relics, they sold atomics. While following the priests from planet to planet, including 38 of Harry Seldon's alleged finger bones. How delightful. That was, for the record, in the Catholic Church, that was a whole thing. That was a whole source of income at one point. This resulted in Hober's trade license being revoked. Oh dear. When Warden Jagger Fount attempted to enter the vault, as it prepared to open for the second time, he was levitated and disintegrated. Okay. Before he died, he repeated the words Hober Mallow, ending with "Get Hober Mallow." Hober Mallow's name was then etched into the outer walls of the vault. It feels like they're making the vault this type of supernatural thing, which it just literally was not in the books. The vault was literally just a piece of radium that would disintegrate at a steady rate or something, and would reveal a hologram of Harry Seldon repeating some sort of message to the Foundationers at a given time. Generally, I think the idea was when crisis would arise, when some sort of thing that they needed to do would arise, and I think he would generally appear after the crisis was supposed to have been correctly settled. All right, on Corel, posing as Master Trader Poignitz, that's what it was. Poignitz. I think that's how that was pronounced in the story I was listening to in any case. Master Trader Poignitz was a completely different character. Hober Mallow was not him. Hober tries to sell teleporting casting devices to the planet's leader, Commodore Asper. They're mixing and matching this. This was a different planet. It was not Commodore Argo. Hober just went there and traded with him, kind of straight up. And the other one, Poignitz, was literally going to a planet where they would not accept any sort of trade because, well, one, they considered the atomics as evil, as part of their own like ancestral worship, whatever. They also did not want, at this point, the type of religion and whatnot had spread. The rumors of their religion had spread to the point where they kind of knew what would happen if they allowed atomics in, and if they allowed the church to control those atomics. Like, that type of reputation had spread about the Foundation. So they didn't want to accept the atomics because they thought they were evil, but also because it would entail, inevitably, this type of control that went hand in glove with the atomics. All right. Sell a teleporting device. In the original one, with Poignitz selling it to the people who didn't want it, they had actually whipped up a thing that could produce gold and sold that to one of the politicians to finagle their way around into selling atomics. And I guess, very interesting story. To sell a teleporting casting device to the planet's leader, Commodore Argo. It is a body swap device that switches places between two people. Uses the swap to steal the Eye of Corel, but is captured again. Hober wasn't really a thief. Like, how, for the love. Was captured and sentenced to be executed. Brother Constance and Polyveris. Okay, so there are actually these guys. Brother Constant and Polyverisov. I don't know who this guy is. Find Hober as he is getting ready to be executed by the Titans. What the Harry is wrong with you guys? He is able to escape using the castling device and goes to Constant and Polly's ship, the Spirits Rising, to steal it. Again, not a thief. And flies it away as Constant and Polly arrive on the ship and forcefully set course to Terminus for Hober. As they arrive on Terminus, Hober and Constance discuss their relationship with the Foundation and their respective upbringing there. When they disembark, Hober is presented to the director and is whisked away from a meeting to discuss the plan for presenting him to the vault. Hober goes into the vault shortly, followed by Constant, Polly, and the director. Time works differently in the vault, however, and again, this is not how it went. It's just a vault. It's literally just a vault. It's not some sort of sci-fi junk. And Hober felt that he had been waiting for a long time for the rest of the group to join him, when in fact it had only been a few minutes later the group met Harry Seldon. Blah, blah, blah. Where he explains to Hober that where he explains to Hober that only he could handle this specific mission. That was not how it worked. That's not how psychohistory works. The whole idea is that you weren't dependent on some individual to do a certain thing. That the individual didn't matter in the grand scheme of things. That this was just how history would work. Historical necessity would demand that such and such and such happen. It dealt with people in their masses. It did not deal with individuals. This is an abomination. Alright. After sending Constant and Polly to Trantor to sell the Foundation to the Empire, Harry keeps Hober. What? The group meet with Harry Seldon, where he explains his specific mission after sending Constant and Polly to Trantor to sell the Foundation to the Empire. Harry keeps Hober behind and explains his separate mission. After leaving the vault, Hober explains that he will not be traveling with Polly and Constant, that he is destined to travel elsewhere and to take the ship Spirit Rising. Right, because the thief all of a sudden becomes good. That makes sense. Nothing like personality tracking or relationship tracking. That's for children. Idiots. Obermallow pilots the Spirit Rising to the coordinates that Harry uploaded into the system. As Hober wakes, he finds nothing at the coordinates. Becky is uneasy as the ship seemingly stalls, while Hober is attempting to calm her. Who's Becky? Okay, where the Harry is. Okay, it's a animal. Everyone loves a good animal, right? Nothing at the coordinates. Becky is uneasy, see the results. While Hober is attempting to calm her, a massive ship approaches, dwarfing the Spirit. Hober docks the Spirit's Rising in the larger ship. Walking into its corridors, he enters a large chamber where he is surrounded by spacers. He is confronted by the she is sent. What the Harry is this crap? Who asks him who he is and why he has defiled the home swarm. It's like some sort of weird God as a woman type thing. Okay. For the record, it only ever refers to it as the Galactic Spirit. I'm pretty sure it's a he in the books. Maybe this is a different religion, but it is. Alright. Shia Center, who asks him, Hober tells the Shia Center that he is able to find the Spacer Swarm as Harry gave him the coordinates, who was looking for them, and presents a vial of synthetic opalesque and important micronutrients to spacers. The Foundation can produce the substance which the spacers think is impossible, and the supply is tightly controlled by Empire. Hober. Okay, now I need to look up opalesque here. Where the area are we? A micronutrients that spacers depend on due to their genetic modifications. So I'm gonna guess spacers would be some sort of race on, asteroids, low bone density or some junk. I don't know. I don't know what that is actually. Don't take my word on that. Is mined by prisoners on the planet Lepsis. Foundation managed to create synthesized opalesque, and Harry Seldon sent Obermallow to treat with the spacers. All right, that's a thing that happened. An important microorganism. The Foundation can produce the substance which the Spacers think is impossible. The supply is tightly controlled by the Empire. However, to broker a deal whereby if the Spacers will work with the Foundation, they can get the substance they need, and they can get back their freedom. He notes that the Empire will no longer need Spacers at some point. Citing technology on his trip, that means he doesn't need Spacers. Huh. See, the entire point of, like, the Foundation was that the Empire was becoming very degenerative. They weren't really developing new techniques. I don't know if that really tracks. That they were developing some sort of technology that meant they would no longer need the Spacers. The Spacer thinks this is very risky, that Empire may take 20% of their offspring if they hear of this conversation, as opposed to the current 10%. She contacts Empire, and the Home Swarm makes their way to Bel-Rios' ship in order to turn Hober over to them. Hober Mallow did not fight Bel-Rios. They were not in the same timeline. They were maybe at some point concurrent, but they did not fight each other. Hober Mallow fought with Asper Argo, and they basically took a part of the Empire. It was basically an economic, siege of sorts. Basically, Hober Mallow sold devices to Asper Argo. What was his name? Commodore Asper Argo. Got him to accept all this stuff as part of his own economy. And then when Asper Argo actually attacked the Foundation, he basically just didn't fight. Right? That was his whole shtick. He did not, do nothing. He did nothing because if the Foundation started taking territories away from the Empire was still really strong at this point. The Empire could have crushed the Foundation. That was the whole point of this. So they literally just didn't want to do anything there. They basically they shut out Commodore Asper Argo by economic siege, right? To the point where there was an uprising. I think at some point the Commodore Asper Argo just surrendered at some point. There was never, it was the least fought battle ever because the Foundation literally just did not want to fight that. That's kind of what Hober Mallow was doing. And he actually, again, I say plutocrat. He was literally a plutocrat. He owned a whole bunch of the stuff, and he was, authoritarian as all get out, to the point where he was making sure there was no sort of uprising within the Foundation to fight the people who were attacking them, pretty much. So he basically made it just kind of a hands-off pacifist, let them burn without, the atomics that they need for their economy. That was the whole strategy in that scenario. And at some point, Commodore Asper Argo decides, hey, guess what? This isn't worth it. And he basically surrenders to the Foundation. And that was actually, I think, one of the first... No, actually, that wasn't technically... don't know if that was directly from Empire to Foundation. That comes later, actually. But he did not fight Bel-Rios. Hober Mallow did not fight Bel-Rios. Okay? So we're actually going to go to Bel-Rios next, I believe. So, in the stories, I actually did read this one. In the stories, Bel-Rios was young and straight and a ladies' man, and in this they made him old and gay. Congratulations. I'm sure you ticked a lot of boxes with that one. Well, probably just one important one. Because someone's got to be gay, right? Bel-Rios is a reincarnated a general serving in the Galactic Empire. Rios is portrayed by Ben Daniels. Rios' first appearance in The King and Communist. King and Commoners. Sorry. Freudian slip. Alright. Bel-Rios is celebrated general. Admiral, not general. They commanded ships and crews in space. He was an admiral, not a general. Of the Galactic Empire, serving 15 years under the Superliminal Armada. He did serve in the outskirts. That's kind of where he got involved with the Foundation, and 10 years in the intelligence. During the conflict in the Lemuel Cluster, Rios disobeyed an order of Emperor Cleon, blah blah blah, and seemingly retreated under fire. He executed a flanking maneuver that allowed him to defeat his enemy with minimal loss of life. While Rios' troops praised him as a hero for saving their lives, Cleon, oh goodness, what is this? 15th? No, 17th, right? 17th imprisoned him for defying him. Did not happen at all. I believe Rios, at some point, it was in the Lemuel cluster, was supposed to have, through some bravery or something, helped two ships of the line, those two ships of the Empire, avoid a head-on collision. And for that, he was awarded a admiralty in one of the border provinces. One of the reasons they wanted him to get him away from the Galactic Center is at this point there had been a lot of uprisings. There was a lot of people who had tried to take the crown. There was a lot of people who perhaps even succeeded at taking the Imperial Purple, at taking the Emperorship, right? So he was a good soldier, but they didn't want him. He liked a good fight. I think that's literally what he says. He likes a good fight, and he's too good to just do away with. So they sent him off to one of the border provinces. Right, that was how he ended up near the Foundation, near enough to start a war with him. There was no imprisonment, not until later. Spoiler alert, foreshadowing. Didn't happen this way. Rios was sentenced to the Opalesque mining prison camp on Lepsis. During his prison time, he was told that his husband, Huzzah, Galwin Kerr, had been executed. How delightful. When it became clear that the Foundation had not been destroyed, as previously thought, Demerzel proposed sending Rios to deal with what the Harry? Again, why is Demerzel doing this? This is Ardeniel Oliva, aka Demerzel. That is not even. I guess maybe there's some sort of mind games going on there. That is not what went on, I don't think, anyways. Demerzel sending Rios to deal with the situation. Cleon the 17th initially balked at the idea, but came to see the logic of it. However, he maintained that Rios be killed if he refused the assignment. Okay. On Lepsis, Rios is held prisoner as a slave and watched over by guards. And for the record, in the actual books, I think the close at this point, I don't even know if Demerzel or Ardeniel is involved at this point. I think Broderick is kind of one of the Emperor's advisor at this point in time. I don't think really Demerzel really comes into it much. I could be wrong about that, but I think at that point this would not have been. He would no longer have been advisor to the Emperor. And to be fair, I think at this point the Second Foundation had kind of come into its own, where it was also helping govern stuff a little bit. Again, spoiler alert, the Second Foundation is based upon Trantor. That was the idea, where like they could have the Foundation out on the outskirts, where it'd be far enough away from the Empire, as it was crumbling at the edges, where it could develop and become the Second Empire. But then you'd have other people on Trantor who could orchestrate events and try to keep the Empire away from the Second Foundations if need be, and stuff like that. Alright, on Lepsis, Rios is held prisoner as a slave, watched over by guards. As he tries to save a prisoner who is struggling with work, he is unsuccessful, as that prisoner is executed for not being able to pull their weight. As he works, Demerzel arrives and interrupts him, giving him a deal to come back and serve the Empire. On the ground, on the grounds that he can go free afterward, he attempts to bargain for the freedom of his fellow prisoners, along with the claim that he will only go with her to discuss what she wants him to do. Demerzel promises that the prisoners will be better treated, and Bell goes with her after learning the Empire lied about the death of Glawen. Oh, wonderful. Back at the Imperial Palace, Bel refuses to clean up to meet Cleon the 17th, saying that he wants to meet him as the person Day made him. Bel greets Day and his brothers. Upon hearing the issue that they want Bel to solve, he asks for a private meeting with Cleon 17th, which is granted. Bel tells Cleon, what is it? Is this a glitch? Yeah, that's 27th. Bel tells Cleon 17th exactly what he thinks of him, and in response to the accusations that he has never seen battle, Cleon 17th demands that Bel strike him. Bel will not do this due to him taking an oath to his emperor. His continues to refuse despite his husband's life being on the line. Cleon 17th lets Glawen live due to this decision. Bel is reunited with Glawen and gets emotional at seeing his husband alive, blah blah blah. Gets cleaned up and the pair embrace. Later, Bel stands beside Glawen preparing to board the Shining Destiny as they discuss their future. Despite Glawen wanting Bel and him to disappear, Bel argues that he wants to stay as he is in a favorable position beside the Empire and could make positive difference. Bel boards the ship and greets his old crew, happy to be back, and set course for the outer reach. For the record, in the books, there's no back and forth him-hawing about this. He is a king's man in no uncertain terms. He is loyal to the emperor. He only gets executed because of some political maneuvering on the part of other people. He is absolutely loyal. He is absolutely into, going out and conquering for the glory of the emperor. He is he's a patriot with regards to the empire, okay? None of this BS. Anyways, the Shining Destiny arrives on Suena. That's accurate. I think Suena is kind of the actually he's made, I think, military governor of Suena at some point. To meet with a local contact about the Foundation's actions. Rios and Glawen stealth insert into the planet wingsuits. Oh, what the Harry? Diving down and attempting to pick up the extraction package dropped by the engineering for their eventual exfiltration. The package was recovered by locals, prompting Rios and Glawen to go after it. Upon attempting to obtain the package peacefully, violence ensues and they win, obtaining the package. Though Glawen does not agree with Bel's tactics, the pair later meet Dukumbar. Now, this is probably a thing where they might butcher it a little bit. For the record, Hober Mallow had also met with Onumbar, Dukumbar's father, at a certain point. The idea is that, to give you a little bit of backstory, Dukumbar is the son of Onumbar. Onumbar would have been a minor political figure in Suena, which would have been a province of the empire at one point. There would have been an uprising where the leader of Suena had rebelled against the empire in order to try and, I guess, get more power or become emperor or something like that. Wouldn't have been the first to succeed, I think. He wouldn't have been the first to try, and if he had, I think the exact phrasing is, if he had tried, he wouldn't have been the first to try. If he had succeeded, he wouldn't have been the first to succeed. Right? Wasn't the first to try, wouldn't have been the first to succeed. But the emperor sends his admiral to fight them. When the empire shows up, the people of Suena rebel against their rebel viceroy. And they basically lay Suena open to the empire who wants to come in and, retake it or whatever, right? But the admiral who is sent doesn't exactly like that. He basically slaughters a whole bunch of Suenians, leaving Onumbar alive, and apparently Dukumbar as well. So you could understand how the Suenians don't exactly like the empire, especially these two. I think Onumbar, Dukumbar's father, lost pretty much his entire family, except obviously his one son. Dukumbar takes a role in this admiral's guard, and I believe at some point or another, it's not exactly specified how, but he kills the admiral in a rather nasty sort of way. That's his vengeance, I guess. All right, so back to the present. The pair later meet with Dukum Bar, their informant, to discuss the Foundation's work on Siwenna. The Foundation hadn't been working on Siwenna at this point. Dukum Bar, for the record, had kind of started a type of cult of sorts. Kind of, they would talk of the magicians at the galaxy's edge, i.e., the Foundation. That is, at this point, like, the Foundation would have had like technological superiority to the Empire itself, although not in quantity. They would have like a quality advantage over anything the Empire could do, because the Empire at this point had been like very, very degenerate sort of culture, to the point where they could no longer improve things. Like technologically, they were kind of regressing. All right. There, Dukum shows them a video of Brother Constant performing magic, and explains that was not the case. They just kind of heard, it was like rumors of magicians at the edge. For the record, when Hober Mallow had visited this guy's father, he had brought like a personal force field shield, which is something special in the Empire. Like they couldn't really do anything like that at that point in time. I don't know if they had ever been able to do anything like that. There, Dukum shows off a video of Brother Constance performing magic and explains to them how Okay, is Dukum Bar a girl now? Come on, dude. Or is Brother Constance a girl? Explained how her and Pulley Verisov used auras during their show. As Dukum explains more, the locals pound on Dukum's door, wanting to apprehend Rios and Glawen. Before they leave, Dukum asks Rios to shoot him, as he will be tortured otherwise. Bell reluctantly agrees to do this, and the pair escape on their ships. That's not the case. Dukum survives. He actually joins the Foundation. He's one of the, I think he would actually be kind of one of the ones that was maybe in charge of Siwenna after the Foundation takes over. He actually advises Rios, who had actually initially, he's one of the few people who did this. He's one of the few like original thinkers in the Empire. They kind of made this guy into a stupid little jackass, right? Bel Rios was kind of like a really cool character. He was one of the few people who was still an original thinker in the Empire. He actually went out to the Foundation. Like they wouldn't do this. Their idea of scientific methodology was to read all the books historically and see what was probably right. Right? Bel Rios actually went out, exploratory mission into the Foundation. Looks around a whole bunch, meets with people, stuff, comes back, then reports, and then he actually goes to Dukum Bar. Actually, he goes to Dukum Bar first, then he goes to the outskirts as an exploratory mission. Then he comes back, all huffed up about what the Foundation is doing, their manifest destiny that they're going to be the Second Empire. That was something that was very apparent to him as he was going to different worlds and whatnot. It was a thing that was kind of in the air, in the ethos of that population. This is not at all how it went. All right. Aboard the Shining Destiny, Rios and Glawen spent time together. How lovely. Rios watching the recording of Cleon 17th ending the genetic dynasty, while Glawen reads the book it was given him from Dukum Bar. Air Officer Kreese, requesting the presence as She Bends Light. What the Harry is with the names? Would like to see them. She Bends Light shows them the footage of the Whisper ship jumping away from Siwenna, noting that it is the smallest jump singularity fold she has ever seen. At that moment, She Bends Light receives a communication from Homeswarm, and the Whisper ship they are looking for is in their custody, and Homeswarm is coming to them. Rios, Glawen, She Bends Light board the Homeswarm to meet with She is Center, and She Bends Light communicates silently. Not a thing, right? The only people who really... there was the mule, which will come into this later. The mule slash Magnifico Giganticus comes into this later, and he can kind of have telepathy. She is center, and she is light. Is not a thing. The second foundation develops telepathic powers, or I guess empathic powers, or something like that, later on. Actually, at the time of the Magnifica, or at the time of Magnifico Giganticus and the mule arising, they kind of develop some of it. They get more into it, I think, later on. But this, not a thing. Not a thing in the books, anyways. Alright. Now, where was I? Turns over Hober Mallow. Again, did not happen. Lathan Devers was the traitor that Belrios captured. He, along with Dukan Bar, escape. They go to the Empire Center in an effort to kind of sow discord between the Emperor and his general. Turns out to be completely unnecessary. Historical necessity, psycho-historical necessity, basically ensures that the Emperor will not allow, I guess, Belrios to win, pretty much. They effectively recalled Belrios to Trantor, where he is summarily tried and executed for treason. Didn't happen. There was no foundation to it. It's just that the Emperor didn't like strong generals, right? Strong, popular generals. Strong, popular, capable generals. So it wasn't really a thing where they needed to do anything. Yeah. Go listen to the books. Anyways. Opens up the Whisper Ship for the Empire. However, Becky is still on board, and she knocks down Rios and Galwin, allowing Hober to escape with the Spirit Rising by jumping in the hangar bay. Okay, that was the thing. Alongside Glawin, Rios watches the intended execution of Poli Verisov and Brother Constant after they were rescued by Hober Mallow. Rios told Glawin he knew it was Hober before the broadcast had confirmed it. Glawin pointed out that Hober had proved that the Empire could be touched. That was exactly the thing they didn't want to do, and exactly the thing Hober Mallow tried not to do. Specifically, intentionally. They didn't want to attract the attention of the Empire yet, because the Empire was still really, really strong. Just in sheer mass of numbers and ships, the Empire was freakishly strong compared to the Foundation. Aboard the Destiny, Bell visits Hober, and Constant explains that they were not as dead as that they are not dead as they are not his to kill. Hober tells Bell about the casting device and that they confiscated it, and Hober tells them about it, helping them realize that the Foundation has some advanced technology. Not some advanced technology. They are perhaps the only original, progressive force in the universe at this point in time. Everything else is pretty much degenerative, back to coal and chemical power in a lot of cases. Constance further explains how she... Okay, so Constance, Brother Constance. What the Harry? Is that a thing? Anyways. Alright, now I have to look this up. Why? Seth Cermak was, in fact, a guy in the original books. He was actually a rival to Salvor Hardin in the latter part of his reign. What? Okay, well, what? Seth Cermak, father. What the hell are they doing? You know what? Don't want to know. Okay. Further explains how she sees the war ending. Hober hears Bell give his assessment of how the Empire is faring and how stupid they are for attacking the Empire. He believes the Empire will fall, just not yet. Again, this is not the way Belrios feels. He is very much into the Empire, very much a patriot, very much a king's man. Empire's man, or Emperor's man, I don't know. Very, very loyal, in any case. Bell is called away as Day arrives on the bridge. Bell tells he believes that they can win without firing a single shot. Day concurs and wants to go down to the planet to talk. Upon receiving orders from Day to take Terminus and the Invictus, Bell scans the ship and agrees with Glawen to take a boarding party. However, the Invictus becomes operational, and a fleet of whisper ships approaches. Bell orders fighters to scramble and intercept the whisper ships. With Glawen able to disable the Invictus during the battle, the Foundation retreat and Bell sends word to Demerzel. However, Glawen's ship is damaged and in the explosion is sent towards the planet to the dismay of Bell. Later, Day orders Bell to send the Invictus onto the planet, consuming it, which is a tough order for Bell to act. Which is a tough order for Bell to act on. I guess act on might be what they're talking about. Action. As Day makes his way to the bridge, he orders Bell to begin the attack on the Invictus. When he gets a comm from Glawen, who survived the crash. Despite repeated orders from Day, Bell takes the time to talk with his life partner privately and fill him in on the situation. Glawen tells him to carry out the order, as he can still take down the Empire from inside. This was not a thing. Not a thing at all. Through tears, Bell sends the Invictus crashing down onto the planet, onto Glawen. Oh, for the love. After what happened on Terminus, Bell is ordered by Day to prepare for the fleet to jump 7 planets the Foundation has a foothold on, to show them the Empire is still around. Bell disobeys this order, blah, 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 blah. Bell disobeys this order. Alright, hold on. Bell is ordered by Day to prepare the fleet to jump to 7 planets the Foundation has foothold on, to show the Empire is still around. Bell disobeys this order, the first since before he was imprisoned, citing that it would be to the moral ruin of the Empire. But the Spaces agree to carry out the order, but notices an anomaly with the jump sequence as the ship starts jumping. As ships start jumping into each other, they cannot be stopped, and Hober tells Day that they are being captured by Spacers. That they're being captured by Spacers was a ruse, and they made a deal with Harry. And a deal was made with Harry. They baited Day into Terminus with his entire fleet due to how precarious and predictable Day is. As Day and Hober fight, Bell intervenes and finally gets to hit Empire after all these years, I assume. The pair fight as Day insists he wants to help. He wants no help from his guard. As the fight continues, Day thinks he has Bell beaten and in the airlock, but Bell uses a casting device to switch bodies, and Day is launched into space to Bell's satisfaction. Okay, with the command lockdown preventing their escape, the ship is stranded. Bell and Hober are able to find a cleaning module with enough air for one person for a day. Bell watches Hober and Constance exchange words, saying how Constance should be the one to use it, which she duly does. Later, the fleet continues to be destroyed as Bell shares wine with Hober. Continues to be destroyed as Bell shared the wine Hober has wanted to try for so long. The pair discuss the endings and how there is honor in death. With the wine tasting terrible, the pair laugh as the ship explodes. Okay, that was not the way to end it at all. Bel-Riose, again, returned to Trantor, called back to Trantor for a military tribunal or some crap like that. Tron trumped up charges of treason, executed. Hober Mallow, uber-capitalist, plutocrat, he basically owns pretty much all of Terminus, well, at least enough of Terminus to control it in a very autocratic sort of way. He rules as mayor, and I think dies at some point. I think he even has a son. For the record, it's not. This goes into what's coming on. It's not, as you would say, Tauren. Mallow, right? It's not Torin Mallow, it's not Beta Mallow either. Right? Neither of those two have any relation, as I understand it, to Hober Mallow. Could be wrong about that. Yeah, that's not how that worked at all. Again, butchered to the nth degree. Alright. I'm going to take a break here. Alright. Actually, give me a second. That's not. All right, 3, 2, 1, mark. To clarify something about that last thing I was talking about, that is Hober Mallow, or I think I was going into that. Yeah, Hober Mallow goes on to he becomes the mayor of Terminus and high priest, Holy Verus, or high priest, whatever, the church, that the religion that's still kind of going on, but he's trying to kind of phase out of use in the Foundation. In the actual one that contends with Belrios to some extent is one of his illegitimate sons, who is still incredibly wealthy. The traders after Hober Mallow become basically the merchant princes. That's what they're called, I think. But yeah, his son, whose name I don't remember, is one of the ones who helps organize the events that bring about the downfall of Belrios, or well, they try to, anyways. Again, as I said, it turns out to be like not so much a thing that they really had anything to do with. It was just like psycho-historical necessity, like the way the dynamics within the Empire were working would not allow the Empire to really be that much of a threat, because emperors didn't like strong generals. Strong generals generally turned their eyes towards the royal purple. They would lead some sort of uprising within the Empire itself, because that was kind of the seat of power and whatnot. The whole psychological dynamics of the Empire were kind of set up so that, well, set up, maybe it just happened that way to some extent as well, that the Empire really couldn't really attack much. They couldn't do much as far as expanding. In any case, where's I going with this? Yeah. He did have a son, illegitimate son, one that was involved in the Belrios thing. All right. But again, Torin Mallow in this series is not the son of Hober Mallow. Torin Durrell, Beta Durrell. So we're going to look at Beta Durrell, because I'm going to call her Beta Durrell probably. Beta is not the wife of Torin. Torin is the husband of Beta Durrell. I tend to think this is mostly about, the story in the books is mostly about Beta Durrell and Magnifico and stuff like that. Like, I think they're maybe the two major players in this scenario. But it's mostly, I think, a story kind of about her. She's the one who defeats the mule. Magnifico Giganticus, again, spoiler alert, you shouldn't be watching this if you're still wanting to read the books by now. But spoiler alert, Magnifico Giganticus is both, he is the mule, right? In disguise as a jester, who Beta and Torin, let's start at the beginning. So I think it starts out with Beta and Torin going to visit Torin's father and whatnot, and they kind of meet with her. Beta is actually, at this point, through the actions of Hober Mallow, I say through the actions, as a prerequisite, his actions brought about type of a plutocracy in the Foundation, where they have almost a despotic sort of leadership. And then you have the Free Traders, which is what Torin is a member of, and there's also an underground movement in the Foundation itself. Beta is a member of that underground movement, who is trying to maybe make sort of a deal with the Free Traders and whatnot like that. Han Pritcher, also a member of the underground movement, that comes into a little bit later here. Beta and Torin go to visit his father on Haven, which would be one of the Free Traders' worlds. They're kind of semi-rebellious, but not really, I guess. They just kind of disappear tax collectors whenever they come looking for it. Anyways, so, Beta Durrell. In the season or in the book, very very smart. There's this like a psychohistorian that comes into this that plays a part in that, but I don't think they're going to be using that in this. Anyways, Beta was born on one of the Foundationer jump past planets. Don't know what that is. And decided to improve her social status since she was not rich. She became a social climber and eventually met and fell for Torn Mallow. Not how it happened in the books. In the books, I believe they maybe met at school. Again, she was a member of the Underground. I think somehow he had figured that out or something like that. Beta realized that Torn had become her world and stopped climbing, vowing that they would rise or fall together. Alongside her husband, Beta produced Scatters. Not that hairy for public consumption. No, all right. Small rounded devices that could float and record footage. Beta and Dror lived a lifestyle where they recorded scatters of their lifestyle and broadcast. What? So they're basically influencers? That's the best you've got? Oh, for the love. Used as scatters to escape the mule, blah, 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 to temporarily blind and disorient the warlord. Okay. For public, showing their lives together. So, yeah, so they're basically influenced. That is the most dastardly warping of the story. They posed and scamped and made people laugh. Once they had people watching them eat, but only because they did it naked. How delightful. The pair were on Calgan during the mule's coup. That's not the case in the books. They come to Calgan after they're sent there actually by Torrhen's father, who wanted maybe some help trying to take on the Foundation, and they'd heard of the mule, who was a kind of like a mercenary, mysterious figure that they didn't know really what the loyalties or purpose of at that point in time. During the mule's coup, but were more concerned that the pair were on Calgan during the mule's coup, but were more concerned that the pirate ship, the Black Tongue, was blocking their sunlight. What the Harry? They sound like a bunch of spoiled jackasses. All right. Beta and Torn were recruited by Captain Han Pritcher of Foundation Intelligence to help him get close to the mule. That's maybe more or less correct in that I think Han Pritcher did, in fact, join them. He was, I think actually he was ordered to do something else, to go check out Haven, but he had heard of the mule on Calgan, and he basically disobeyed orders. It wasn't the first time he'd done that. he was a type of interesting fellow, in that he had been in intelligence for quite a long time, and he should have been promoted, but he had a tendency to disobey orders. Sometimes he was a free thinker, put it that way. So he ends up going to Calgan to actually check out the mule and see what's going on there, because he sees it as perhaps a graver threat than some sort of free trader alliance or something like that. All right. Beta to help him get close to the mule. The mule was throwing a party on Calgan. Mule did not throw parties. He was not a person who was seen. The warlord of Calgan was someone who I think the mule kind of used almost as a figurehead or something like that a little bit. Maybe? I'm not for sure. But he might have been missing too. I'm not for sure. But yeah, the mule was not really a party throwing type of fellow. Obviously, because, yeah, never mind. It comes into it later too, I guess. I'll explain. Like, obviously, Magnifico was a very kind of... The mule was a misnomer a little bit, in the way that people would normally understand. That the idea would be that strong as a mule or something like that. That was kind of the aura that Magnifico had tried to cultivate around this figure. But obviously, it was kind of used ironically, and also because Magnifico, or rather the mule, was impotent. He couldn't have offspring or something like that, so he would he used that kind of as a moniker for himself. But yeah, it was ironic. It was a little bit. I think he wanted to maintain the mystique around the character, and that was kind of his hidden ace, his ace up the sleeve. All right. And both Torrin and Beta were on the guest list. Pritchard wanted to use them to gain access to the party. Torrin pointed out that his uncle was Randu Durrell, I assume, not Mallow, and that if I never know if it actually mentions his last name. I think they just call him Randu. And if they were caught spying, then it would throw. Actually, an interesting point. There was a whole thing. At this point in time, the traders had kind of developed maybe their own traditions a little bit, where they literally, it was very unorthodox that Torrin actually married Beta Durrell, because traders didn't marry. It was a type of the OG red pill a little bit, where I think Randu actually says something to the effect that it has, or I think actually Torrin's father and Randu would have been his grandfather, I think, or something like that. Torrin's father was like, oh, it has its advantages or something, and I think Randu was like, mostly for the woman. So he was like the OG Andrew Tate. All right. I think that's more or less how it unfolded. In any case, they were caught spying. Torrin pointed out that his uncle was Randu Mallow, and if they were caught spying, then it would throw suspicion on the Alliance of Traders. Yeah, there were a kind of a consortium of free traders that were trying to, Anyways, giving Mayor Inber and the Foundation cover. Beta and Torrin agree to attend the party with Pritchard in tow. Once inside, Pritchard warns them to stay back, and they split off from them. Shortly after, Pritchard came back, clearly distressed, and told them to go home before leaving. Beta and Torrin decide to investigate the mule themselves. Beta decides to talk to his balladeer, Magnifico Giganticus, but needed a distraction. Torrin headed off to talk with the mule directly. While with the mule distracted, Beta showed Magnifico sympathy, and it was clear that the mule was rough with him. All right. She speared Magnifico out of the nightclub and was soon joined by Torrin, who was being chased by the mule and pirate crew boarding their ship. Beta was furious that Torrin had been hurt and wanted to kill the mule. Torrin was not... Well... No, Torrin was not hurt in the original one, actually. And it wasn't a nightclub. They were on the beach, where Magnifico approached them, and then I think Torrin kind of beat up one of the warlord of Calgan's guards or something like that. Yeah. Anyways, and their ship did not get attacked by a missile. Wanted to kill the mule, but they were forced to leave Calgan. Their ship, the Chaser, was hit by a missile but managed to jump. The damage to the Chaser meant that they could no longer reach New Terminus. What? There was no New Terminus. No, there was some debate at some point during, actually, I think it's Foundation's Edge, about changing the location of Terminus. There was no New Terminus, unless it's to the same planet, just a different city. I don't think there was anything like that. It was a temperate planet located a parsec away from the original. No, didn't happen. Did not happen. Shut your eyes and pretend it didn't happen, okay? Realized that the only place they could go was Haven. Unfortunately, they were shot down on the approach to the trader's stronghold as their comms were damaged. A group of traders led by Randu Mallow discovered the three of them from the crash. The three of them from the crash. Beta spent the time talking to Randu and convinced him that there was value in helping them take Magnifico to the Foundation, and that his involvement might help the traders get what they want. Randu agreed to the idea. Not the case, not how it happened at all. They went to the Foundation first. The entire premise of this war was that if you don't... Maybe we'll go into that later. Beta is later revealed to be the mule, the true mule. I'm going to make a prediction. I guess I don't know if this is revealed in the show yet, but if she's a villain, she's going to be one of two things. She's either going to be sympathetic or respectable. You never have a dastardly woman or minority villain. They're either respectable or sympathetic and respectable. Maybe both. Maybe both. Take your pick. Infinite Array. Alright, Han Pritchard. I don't know if we're going to look at him much. I already kind of explained his. I guess I don't know what they did with him or what. Yeah, maybe I should. Alright. Han Pritchard. Let's go. Alright, Han Pritchard. Don't know if he was black. Again, probably the most likely thing in this type of galaxy would be mostly ethnically ambiguous people. Han Pritchard was a member of the Second Foundation raised on Ignis. He spent decades learning from Harry Seldon. Nope, not even vaguely close. Of course, they're playing merry heck with the timeline, so didn't meet Gal Dornick either. And watching Gal Dornick sleep in her cryopod. Over time, he came to fall in love with her and Gal, returning his affections during their waking moments. Despite their feelings, they only spent an equivalent of 32 full days together over the years. Pritchard was sent to work. Again, they didn't allow Gal Dornick to be on Foundation because they didn't want psycho historians being involved in the course of history at the Foundation. Pritchard was sent to work for the Foundation, keeping his allegiance to the Second Foundation secret. No, not a thing. Was not part of the Second Foundation that I know of. He rose to the rank of Captain of Information for Foundation Intelligence, working alongside Stephanie in 2392 era Imperial. When they deployed to the planet Haven to gather evidence that the Galactic Empire was supplying weapons to the Alliance of Traitors, they didn't really need weapons from the Empire. Well, I guess I don't know, maybe. But I feel like, again, at this point, the Empire was so degenerate that it couldn't really even maintain its own atomic motors. It had atomics, but they would work from generation to generation. And the people who would take care of the atomics were kind of degenerative themselves. They didn't really understand it. They just kind of vaguely got maybe a little bit of what to do with them and what to keep from breaking or something. They could maintain... I don't think they could improvise or make anything new or even really fix things that broke that much. After observing a shipment of weapons dropped on a planet and collected by Randu Durrell, I'm not going to... Stupid. Alright. And another traitor, Pritchard and Stephanie attempted to intercept them and secure physical evidence using flitters. They gave chase over the surface of Haven, trying to keep the moon's shadow to prevent them from being incinerated by the planet's sun. Haven was cold. I think Haven was supposed to be like freakishly cold. They lived underground because it was cold. Maybe it was just an intemperate world or something like that. I guess I don't know. Pritchard targeted Randu, drawing alongside him and attempting to subdue him. Eventually, Pritchard was able to... know Randu off the flitter, but was unable to secure the evidence. His flitter was locked with Randu's and heading for a crash. Stephanie drew alongside him, and Pritchard jumped onto the back of her vehicle, speeding away from the sunlight. Pritchard called in their whisper ship for extraction, and they left the planet. As they prepared to jump, Stephanie attempted to become intimate with Pritchard. Okay. But he declined, stating that his loyalties lay elsewhere. Oh, sweet glory. A report came in indicating that the mule had taken control of Calgon. Heading to New Terminus, Pritchard broke into the mayor's Inbur's office to meet with him, and Inbur was surprised by his appearance, but Pritchard pointed out that he had designed the security systems for the mayor's office. Not necessarily the case, not in the books anyways, relying on their failure to secure the physical evidence of the Empire's actions. At this point, again, in technology-wise, with regards to like security or anything like that, the Foundation would have been light years ahead of the Empire itself. Again, personal force fields. There was a message type capsule where they'd have something where they could only open it with a certain signet, but with the Foundation, the message would actually disintegrate after. So they were a lot better at a lot of stuff than the Empire itself. They just didn't have the sheer like force that the Empire did. Inber demanded that he get it. All right. Relaying their failure to secure physical evidence of the Empire's actions, Inber demanded that they get it. However, Pritchard wanted to go after the mule instead, so that I guess that part's kind of right. Wait, who is Stephanie here? All right. She's cute, but again, that was not a thing in the books. I don't think Pritchard's ever recorded as having any sort of relations with anyone. He's kind of a career spy. I guess it's not stated that he didn't, but Stephanie's a member of alongside Pritchard. She was deployed to Haven. Blah 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 blah. All right. Gather evidence. After warning, observing shipment webs dropped. Okay, where did I stop here? Where did I stop here? Flitters, Pritchard targeted random. Heading to New Terminus. However, Pritchard wanted to go after the mule instead. Pritchard believed that the mule had psychic abilities, which Inber found preposterous. And the whole reason the Foundation and Pritchard and all of them were like, one of the reasons they were so consumed with it was because the notion of psychohistory was, again, that individuals didn't matter. But if a person had psychic powers and they could alter the way masses of humans would interact or react out of an ordinary sort of fashion, that could, in theory, throw a monkey wrench into the Selden plan, right? This psychohistorical plan for the Second Foundation, or for the new Empire. All right, where were we going? Where did we leave off? He wanted Pritchard to focus on the proof so he could make the traitors eager for peace and have the coming crisis sorted out before the vault opened. Pritchard could then devote himself to the mule. I don't really know if that's the way it worked out. He might have thought that it was preposterous, but I don't think he ever really explained that Pritchard could then dedicate himself to the mule per se. Responded angrily to Inber, slapping his candy dishes away, causing Inber to revoke his launch privileges and informing him that's not the way it went. He kind of left under the pretense that maybe, I think he didn't exactly confront Inber at that point in time. He left and went to Calgan. There was no, like, fight or anything like that. Actually, no, I think, yeah, literally Hans Pritchard just left and went to Calgan. All right. During this altercation, Pritchard had stolen Inber's key fob and then absconded with his personal whisper ship, the Inber. Again, not the way it happened. Pritchard traveled to Calgan, where he met Torin and Beta Durrell, who were rich galactic celebrities. No, they weren't. And were honeymooning on Calgan. That is the case. They were honeymooning. Well, technically it was kind of a dual thing. They were supposed to find the mule and they were also going on a honeymoon. And were essentially ignoring the chaos as life on Calgan largely continued on. Pritchard wanted to recruit them to get them close to the mule. After conquering the planet, the mule had chosen to throw a party to indulge his vices. Not the case. The mule was not really a viceful person. He was kind of very reclusive, as I had stated previously. Didn't want to be seen. And Torin and Beta were on the guest list. Pritchard hoped to use them to infiltrate the party so that he could get his eyes on the mule. Torin and Beta agreed to this proposal. Pritchard was accompanied by them accompanied them to the party. Once inside, blah, 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 blah. Alright, once inside, he told the couple this was a reconnaissance mission and they should hang back and do nothing. Pritchard tried to get close to the mule and use his own psychic... What the... Ay. He did not have psychic abilities. Not that I know of. He is actually... At one point in time, he becomes a mule's man, right? You literally, like... Yeah. As I said, like, maybe I should clarify this again. He was a member of the Underground. He doesn't have psychic powers. He's a member of the Foundation Underground that Beta is also a part of, I think. But no, he doesn't have psychic powers. At one point, he becomes converted to the mule's cause. If he had psychic powers, I wouldn't... Stupid. Anyways, however, the mule probed back and became away with the name, Gal Dornick. Not a thing. Pritchard, overwhelmed by the mule's power, fled the party once and retreated from Calgan. He traveled to Ignis to report to Gal, sharing his experience mentally with both her and Preem Palver. Preem Palver was a guy, but I don't know if he came along until later. He might have been the one who handled the mule at the end of, or at the beginning of Second Foundation, but he was not involved with either. He was not involved with Gal Dornick. I think he might have been involved with this guy. Oh goodness, my brain is deserting me. Pritchard. He might have been involved with Pritchard and kind of figuring out some of the situation with him and the mule. That might have been his doing. He told Gal that the mule had managed to pull her name from his mind. Gal realized that this is how the mule knew who she was, but was relieved that he had not learned about Ignis. Pritchard and Gal spend time together, but she needs him to return to New Terminus to ensure that the Foundation would be ready for the crisis to come. Pritchard told her that Inber was a problem and that he would not take the mule seriously. He almost that the future could be changed, and that Gal was running towards to a vision she had had 150 years ago. Gal told him that she had tried to project herself forward past her confrontation with the mule during her wake cycles, and that she could not do it. Oh, sweet glory. So she's basically a space witch now. Okay. Pritchard wanted more from their relationship, but Gal pointed out that the mule got their names from him because he was holding on too hard. Pritchard told her that Harry wanted Gal to have a better life than he did. Pritchard returned to Foundation Station, where he was confronted by Mayor Inburn over his handling of the situation with the Mallows and their kidnapping of the mule's balladeer, Magnifico Giganticus. Inburn was worried that the Mallows would end up in the hands of the Galactic Empire and say they were working for the Foundation intelligence. Pritchard knew that he had to answer for his disobedience, but asked to be allowed to go after the Mallows and defer punishment until later. Inburn refused, ordering Warden Greer to lock him up and be aware that Pritchard designed the security protocols, and to be aware that Pritchard was stripped and scanned internally by Greer and then placed in a cell with basic prison clothes. Stephanie was present and took the token from Gal that Pritchard wore about his neck. She told him that she knew Pritchard believes that he could get out of anything, but he'd also trained her. Stephanie promised him that he would not make it if he tries to escape. Okay. So, there's Han Pritchard. Alright. Let's get into this. Magnifico Giganticus is a main character in Season 3 of the Apple TV series Streaming Foundation. He is the mule's balladeer. Remember, in the book, these are one and the same. Magnifico, the mule, same guy. Is the mule's balladeer and is said to be a clown who heralded his arrival with music. He heralded the arrival of the mule on Calgan to meet with the Archduke Balerion. After the mule conquered Calgan, he threw a party in a nightclub and invited the planet's elite and wealthy. Magnifico enthralled the crowd with his music. Not what happened. The Visisonar was only a thing that he got after he got to the Foundation, and he uses it effectively as an amplifier for his empath powers to effectively control the way other people feel. I don't think he's like an entire empath, or I don't think he's an entire like telepath or something like that. He can't like really do it, but he can sense how other people feel. Yeah, how other people feel, and he can kind of tack their emotions into place so they can only feel a certain emotion towards him. So if it's loyalty, he can, lock that into place. If it's whatever, I think later on he might, like, it's inadvertently maybe revealed that he does kind of see more with regards to that type of thing, where he might develop like a stronger abilities or something after the events of Beta and them going around together. But after, like, further on, I think he it feels like he can at that point kind of read people's thoughts. Threw a party in a nightclub and invited the planet's elite and wealthy. Magnifico enthralls the crowd with his music, and while his music is beloved, the mule is still rough with his balladeer. During the party, he's befriended by Beta Mallow, who is seeking information on the mule. She convinces Magnifico to follow her outside, and when her husband Torn arrives, he is running from the mule. Magnifico joined the Mallows aboard their starship as they made their escape from Calgan. The ship could not make it to New Terminus. That's not the case. They made it to Terminus. They did not go to Haven. Haven came later. Due to the damage, it is instead headed for Haven. The ship was shot down by the traders on approach, and due to damaged comms by Magnifico, Torn, and Beta were recovered by Torn's uncle, Randu Mallow. Again, not the way it happened. They went to Terminus first. Magnifico / the mule did his thing there, controlling the Terminus people, at which point, obviously, Terminus fell to the mule. First he'd attacked, I guess he was somehow getting in contact with his forces. I think maybe from the ship that they were actually on. So the mule attacks the Foundation. Magnifico's doing his empath / telepath / whatever thing to control the people on Haven, and the leaders and the generals of Haven's military kind of surrender at inopportune times, and blah 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 blah. Then when the ships start descending on Terminus itself, there's kind of this really depression type thing that he kind of facilitated through his concerts with his Visisonar, which he was gifted to by the psychologist on Terminus. Not at this point. He didn't have the Visisonar at this point. And then they go to Haven, and Magnifico / the mule does his thing there as well. Kind of an ampant will depression. He has this thing where he supercharges people's brains, effectively allowing them to use more of their intellect or whatever, which he did use to get someone to create a nuclear force field depressor or something like that would mess with the technology a little bit, but that wasn't like really the main push of his thing. At the Stronghold, Magnifico talks with Torn about the traders and Randu, knowing that Beta was attempting to charm his uncle into helping them. Magnifico decides to help by playing music to support her. Beta convinces Randu to help them reach New Terminus. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, wonderful. So, this guy is effectively a doorknob. I don't know. Alright, the mule, known as the Warlord of Calgan, wasn't the Warlord of Calgan. He overcame the Warlord of Calgan and kind of made, I guess maybe that makes him de facto the Warlord of Calgan. I don't know. He appears in a vision to Gal Dornick as bringing destruction to the Foundation and killing Salvor Hardin. The mule is portrayed in Season 2 by Mikhail blah blah blah, first appearing in A Glimpse of Darkness. The role was recast for Season 3 with Pilu Asbak taking on the role. A monster of a man and powerful mentalic. He was not, again, it was used ironically. I think the mule was, I say used ironically. The mule was not in reference to his physical size. Obviously, Magnifico Giganticus, the Jester, was neither, huge nor strong. He was kind of a freak. But the mule part was in reference to his inability to have heirs, his impotence, right? Rises to power 152 years in the future with the intention of conquering the galaxy. The mule senses the arrival of Gal Dornick in his time and resolves to find her before she finds him. It feels like they're really amping up everyone's abilities. This was not what happened. Again, the mule / Magnifico was a partial empath. At that point in time, he would have been a partial telepath. At that point, he would have been more of an empath where he could kind of fix people's emotions in place, but I don't know if he could even really read people's emotions so much. Or thoughts, that is. Resolved to find her because she finds him, even if he has to burn the galaxy to do it. The mule was a pirate. Not the case. It's revealed later that he wasn't a pirate. I don't even know if he was necessarily particularly bullied growing up, perhaps. I guess I don't know. But yeah, that's maybe something comes into it later. I think, so to clarify, I think the mule would have been raised on Gaia by other empaths, and he escaped at some point. He was kind of a rebel telepath, but that gets into a little bit of the later stuff. I don't know what happened to him after that, but whatever the case, he seems to have been. And to be fair, I kind of count the original 3 foundational books as kind of almost their own canonical type of thing, because I feel like he kind of stopped there, and then because of money and whatnot, he continued the series and maybe did a little bit of ad-libbing as to the origin of the mule. It makes more sense if he literally just is perhaps someone who was raised in a poor sort of thing, just some sort of mutant or something like that. I guess maybe that's my own headcanon. Alright. Heralded his arrival whenever he went. Setting his sights on the pleasure planet of Calgan, the mule kidnapped the daughter of Archduke Balerion and arranged at the meeting to ransom her back or he would kill the girl. At the meeting, the mule demanded that Balerion install him as the new warlord of Calgan. When Balerion refused, citing that any takeover of Calgan would trigger a military response from both the Galactic Empire and Foundation. That was actually a thing that happened. The whole notion was that, well, I said happened. I think it was kind of maybe a well-founded improvisation in that Calgan was a pleasure world and pretty much everyone liked it and no one would really touch it because it was a place that served everyone and didn't refuse service to anyone. So it was just kind of a neutral zone of sorts. So most people just stayed away from it as far as like conquering or something like that. The mule stated that he would consume them both. Balerion told him that he was foolish to approach without an army, but the mule, was unconcerned, stating that he needed no army. He had abilities. He planted suggestions in the minds of Balerion's wing commanders and infantry troops. Again, this feels like it's a little bit too delicate for his powers at this point in time. He's more of an empath where he could make people feel loyal to him as a person. He could do that type of thing, but as far as like more delicate, like actually planting thoughts or something like that into the minds of others, wing commanders and infantry troops that had accompanied him to fire on each other, with only Balerion left alive. The mule demanded that he hand over his signet ring, and Balerion complied, biting off his own finger when he couldn't get it off. The mule took the ring and instructed Balerion to kill himself in his own time. Taking control over Calgan, the mule's forces worked to consolidate their hold on the world. At Balerion's residence, this was not. I don't feel like this was really necessarily how the mule would quite often go about things. In that he would, as with Beta and Torin or whatever, like he would go places and fiddle with people's emotions and minds and mentalities so that they would behave a certain way. I think it's more intricate than these people are capable of weaving into their stories. I don't know. At Balerion's residence, the mule gathered his household staff and explained that they would change people's affection and coerce them into doing things. But it was that he could change people's affections and coerce them into doing things, but it was taxing. However, he had found he did not have to convert everyone, and sometimes a display of his power was enough to convert others. He brought out Skirlet, Valerian's daughter, and asked her if she loved the mule, which she did more than anything. The mule gave Valerian's gun to Skirlet and told her to put it to her head and shoot. Okay, the young girl did, wanting to please the mule more than anything. The gun did not fire, but the effect of the demonstration was clear to the assembled staff. As the mule worked to establish his presence on Calgan, he wanted to prove something to the galaxy. Instead of going in, I smell some sort. For the record, I read through this before, but it feels like they very carefully crafted a type of incel energy, a little bit. Instead of going into hiding like most dictators did, that's what he did. The mule was very reclusive, didn't really care about what people thought, more or less. Well, I say didn't care, but he wasn't some sort of like attention-grabbing whore. The mule intended to indulge his vices, didn't have vices, at least not of that sort, throwing lavish parties and inviting the rich and elite of Calgan. The mule and his entourage were joined by hundreds of revelers, and the mule used Magnifico Giganticus to entertain them with his music. During Magnifico Giganticus' performance, the mule realized that someone with mental abilities was probing him. Catching sight of the man amongst the crowd, the mule probed back and came away with a name. Gal Dornick, again, more of an empath at this point in time. I think he later maybe learns to do some stuff like that, but the man fled once he realized the mule's powers were more than a match for his. The mule approached by Torrin Mallow, Torrin Durrell, who brought drinks and seemingly wanted to join them. Van Dag recognized Torrin as being a famous personality, but the mule knew that Torrin's manner was insulting them. He demanded that Torrin insult him again, giving him until the end of the song. Nervous, Torrin launched into a series of insults that questioned the mule's sterility, his loneliness and class envy, and even that the name of his ship sounded like a venereal disease. The mule was delighted that he was actually insulted, but he took the peeler to Torrin's hand and began to flay his skin. Torrin escaped by using the scatters to create a blinding flash, momentarily disorienting the mule. The mule and his crew followed Torrin outside to find him, fleeing aboard his starship. Van Dag fired a missile at the ship, striking it, but he managed to jump away. The mule learned that they had taken Magnifico Giganticus with them. Shortly after, the mule and his crew led his crew on a raid to secure the Empire's jump gates. During the takeover of the situation, Mule conversed with Cleon over the hologram. Not the case. Alright, where was it? Shortly after, Mule led his crew on a raid to secure one of the Empire's jump gates. During the takeover of the station, the Mule conversed with Cleon over hologram. Cleon, 25, wanted to make the mule's rule of Calgan legitimate, but with the Empire as its surazan. What the period is this? Right. Sovereign, or state having some control over another state. Okay, that's a thing. The mule rebuffed his attempts, and the Empire was unaware that one of their jump gates had fallen to the mule. When there were no jump gates that I know of. Again, that's also not a thing at this point. They literally had ships that jumped. There were no jump gates. When the Empire implemented the first planetary enclosure since the sack of Terminus under Cleon, the planetary enclosure, that was something Bel Rios did. This wasn't a... Well, I guess maybe there were other ones. But it feels like the most distinctive one was the one that Bel Rios attempted on Foundation when he was attacking it. This did not happen. When the Empire implemented the first planetary enclosure since the sack of Terminus under Cleon 17th, The mule used Cobalt Spike to generate a massive coronal mass ejection that destroyed the Golden Horse Gate, 5 Imperial fleets, and Calgan itself. Okay. Again, didn't happen, but that's bold strategy, Cotton. He contacted the Galactic Council via Holocast, the body responsible for approving all fleet deployments, and telling them that he only chose Calgan because it was close to a jump gate. He had left prior to the Imperial fleet arriving. With Calgan and the Imperial fleet gone, the mule blamed the suffering on the Empire. Again, this is just like screaming, hey, we want to make it incel vibes. So you have a guy who's just kind of a whiny little whatever. Alright. The mule strives to destroy the last thing standing in his way, Hari Seldon, Gal Dornick, and the Second Foundation. Gal projects her consciousness into this future, and during a confrontation with her, the mule realizes that the younger version of Gal is present in her mind. In a final confrontation, Gal defeats the mule and slits his throat, killing him. However, it is revealed that the mule was never the true danger or the true mule, but rather Beta Malo, for the love. What a way to do it. Okay. All right. So that was the current state of the Foundation TV series as it sits. And it seems the most thoroughly abominable adaptation ever. It bears little more than a passing resemblance to the original material. Yeah, names are the same. Everything else is pretty much garbled into oblivion. So it was definitely a thing that happened. Frankly, it'd be... I was going to make a joke about Salvor Hardin, breaking into slam poetry at some point, but that would be racist. And I don't have a racist bone in my body. In particular, the bone that black people use to win races. Sorry. All right, sorry. I do wish more people would talk about this one, though, because this is... It's terrible. It's terrible. Terrible thing that they did. Desecration, in fact. I was actually looking at the reviews on it. The first season... It got actually like something like 72, I think, on Rotten Tomatoes or something like that. And then like a 62 on Metacritic. And there's kind of a pattern that presents itself that the ratings go up as the seasons go on. There's only 3 of them so far, but I guess it's not a whole lot of points on the graphs. But there's 3 of the seasons so far. The ratings go up. That is, that they get like a better rating, but the number of reviewers goes way down. I think at this point, like the number of reviewers on Rotten Tomatoes is down to like 1/4 of what it was, and the number of reviewers on Metacritic is down to like 1/3. So I can only hope that that means that it's becoming less and less popular, and that the people remain who really, really like it, or who are really, really, captured by that sort of stuff. Anyways, hope you enjoyed that. Bye.